Zoom people, just like you've been doing, please in the chat, if there's any issues, let us know. I'm going to try to do my best to manage like this hybrid thing. So thank you in advance for your patience. So my name's Emily. I'm a postdoc here at Penn State, just downstairs. I want to first thank, there's been a lot of people involved in planning this and putting this on. And the good news for everybody that's attending this today is that these are all people who are really heavily invested in your success. As PhD students and as postdocs here at Penn State, there's been a really big push and fantastic support from all of these Penn State entities to help you succeed. So that's really the focus of today. What I will be talking about in this first hour is an overview of what is a fellowship, how do they work. We'll talk a little bit about the common funding opportunities that we talk about. These are specific to the life sciences. When people registered, there were lots of questions about like, how do I manage the timeline? I'm a PhD student. When do I start applying for postdocs? When do I start applying for fellowships? So we'll talk about that. At the end, I will start with an overview of tips and tricks that I've picked up in my personal experience applying for fellowships. And keep in mind that we'll dive much deeper into that with the following 2 sessions of this series. So we have 2 overarching goals for today. The first, I hope that everybody leaves this session, if you're on Zoom or here in person, I hope that you leave feeling empowered. I want to empower you to navigate this very complex funding landscape, to understand what your options are, and to know how to initiate the process of writing a fellowship proposal. I also want you to understand a little bit about the strategy. How are fellowships different than research grants, and how can you make yourself more competitive for a fellowship? And Karen, who is going to talk after me in the second hour, is also going to do an awesome job of those 2 things as well. As a quick plug, we have 2 more sessions of this coming up. The next session is targeted more for the F32, but this will be really applicable to other life sciences fellowships. So highly encourage you to attend, even if you are not planning on submitting the F32. The third session, we are currently putting together a panel of other postdocs who are funded on different types of fellowships. So we're going to have some peer review opportunities, some like peer coaching, some Q&A. So that's going to be a really great place to come. It's a very safe space to come bring your ideas, your stuff that's in progress, anything that you want feedback on. So what I'd first like everybody to do is spend just a few moments filling out a very quick survey. There's a QR code here that you should be able to scan with your phone and tell me in like 1 or 2 words, what's the biggest challenge that you are facing with this idea of applying for postdoctoral fellowships? People on Zoom would be great if you can do this too with the QR code, or you can go to that website, slido.com, and enter those numbers and participate in this. Okay, so we'll see if this works. So this is a word cloud of what everybody put in. This is hard because these are like multi-word answers, so it's not like the ideal situation for a word cloud. So most people are concerned about formatting, uncertainty, writing, the like general uncertainty around funding competition, how to initiate it. These are kind of like the exact themes that I kind of guessed everybody, because we're all in the same boat, right? Everybody right now is just feeling so incredibly unsure and uncertain and very scared. But there's also like, you're also in this room probably as either a PhD student or a postdoc, and that's also a very scary time in your personal career in general, because you are on your way to your career and not really knowing what's next, and it can be very difficult to navigate. So I hope that this can help us recognize that we're all in this together. And then that there's like, it's very normal to feel really like intimidated about this process, even under like not the times that science is going through right now. So we will jump right in now to some kind of like lecture-y parts, and then we'll have a little bit of interaction as we go through this, because I think there is a lot to be gained from everybody in this room having their own experiences and questions and things to share together. On Zoom, we'll do this. We'll ask you to participate kind of like in the chat. Okay, so postdoc fellowships. What are they? How do they work? If you are a postdoc, this is a period of temporary mentored research. There's a key thing there. Postdocs are temporary and they are mentored. These are career training periods for you to get the skills and the professional development that you need for your dream career. Fellowships are granted to an individual to support their training. And that's really the key difference between a research grant and a fellowship. So we'll go through this in a little bit more detail. Maybe. Fellowships are different than research grants. Fellowships, in research grants, the focus is research. In fellowships, there's this extra focus where we're focusing on the training of the fellow and the career development. On a research grant, the PI or the principal investigator, the person who's writing the grant and leading the research, they're expected to have the skills to do the research. As a postdoc, you are expected to acquire the skills that you need to do the research. And in fact, if you have all the skills that you need to do the research you're proposing, that will be reviewed unfavorably. You need to think about what you need to grow into your research and into your career, and think about the fellowship as a training-oriented document. Research grant, the outcome of a research grant is the research impact, far and away. On a fellowship, there's, again, this extra layer where you're not only trying to have great research outcomes, but you're trying to have your career development as part of this fellowship. Finally, there's some weird logistical things with the way fellowships work, which we won't really get into details about, but research grants fund the research. Some of them also include salary, but the focus is research funding. Most fellowships will pay the salary of the fellow. This is termed a training stipend. And only some of them provide research money. So on my NIH fellowship, it mostly just pays me. There's like very, very little money for actual research. Because again, the focus of these is the training and the career development, and providing you some space and time to be a postdoc and get all this research training that you need to go on to then your like permanent or full career. I wanted to touch on taking the initiative to write these fellowships, because if you're entering a postdoc on something like a funded grant and you have a project and you're coming on with funding, it might be difficult to secure the time that you need to apply for fellowships with your advisor. I've heard from other students, other postdocs saying like, I really want to do this, but my advisor isn't really supportive of it, or I'm not sure how to talk to my advisor about doing this. So let's just tackle that head on. What's in it for them? What is your advisor getting out of you writing a fellowship, and particularly if you're already on a funded project? So these are things to strategize and keep in mind as you start these conversations. These are really important for your professional development and to help you get the career that you want. If you want to go into academia, like a tenure track position, having grantsmanship experience, even if you don't get it funded, is really important. And the better that you do in your career, the better that looks for your advisor. So there's some very like transactional things we can think about. These present great opportunities for collaboration. If your lab is looking to establish a new collaboration, use a new resource on campus, this is a great way to formalize that relationship. And finally, your advisor gets a shot at a free postdoc because the fellowships pay you, and then your advisor doesn't have to pay you. So in that way, it's kind of a win-win. So when you're starting these conversations with your advisor, I would encourage you to think about, from their perspective, how can you make this a win for both of you and you both get something out of it? You need to be proactive. I would really suggest coming to your advisor with some ideas, a list of funding opportunities, a list of research ideas. I am here to encourage you and to empower you to really take control over your own postdoctoral training period. And that can be very intimidating and very difficult. And I'm here to tell you that that's okay. And I hope that this helps you have those conversations. You also need to plan way ahead, and we'll touch on this as we go throughout today, what timelines look like and how long these processes take. I would highly recommend not coming to your advisor the week before the NIH deadline and saying, I'm going to write an F-32, because that's ultimately a 75-page document that takes months to put together. So help yourself, give yourself plenty of time to think about this, to do it right, plan for feedback. There were lots of questions about like, how do I find funding opportunities? What's out there? What am I eligible for? So really quickly, the common ones in life sciences that you will hear a lot about. And by the way, I believe Karen and I are both going to share our slides today, so you don't have to like write all of these down as I'm talking. We'll make these available to everybody who registered. The NIH F-32 award. NIH research is targeted for biomedical stuff, although that's very broad. And NIH has a second mechanism of postdoctoral funding called the K-99. K series in particular are a little bit different than F series. So there's some different types of postdocs that they're targeting. The K-99 award in particular transitions to a faculty award. This makes you extremely competitive for faculty jobs, but as you can imagine, they're very difficult to get, and you really need to be established in your research program. So these tend to be a little bit more advanced. F-32s are typically what most like doctoral students and early postdocs are going for. The NSF has a postdoctoral funding mechanism. One of these is called the Research Fellowship in Biology, or the PRFB. USDA has a postdoctoral mechanism. And so most funding agencies at the federal level have a postdoc funding mechanism in some way. So if you are like funded by NASA or your advisor is funded by NASA, go look at NASA. They probably have a postdoctoral fellowship. These are really common in federal agencies. There are internal opportunities, and these are going to be specific to each university. So if you're a PhD student starting to look at postdoc universities, do some Googling, find out if some universities might have something like a T32 that funds postdocs, or Penn State has something called the Presidential Fellows. These are going to differ by university, and you pretty much find them by looking at the specific schools. If you are, yeah.
With like the helps research, you know, the government, like the public, how does those decisions impact the funding opportunities?
Right now, they have not been. My F-32 was awarded in December and went through just fine. I got great feedback from the NSF last week, so those are still going through. Other than that, nobody knows. I'm sorry, nobody knows yet. Will they be impacted in the future? Maybe, we don't know. So far, they're.
I just want to provide another perspective. So I applied for the USDA NEPA AFRI under the Sustainable Agriculture Program Priority Area. I was supposed to hear in February and it's the end of March. So I think that's very dependent on what your application says. My application has the word diversity in it 23 times because I study biodiversity.
Yeah, so, so this happened to me last year with the NSF. So last year for everything that happened to me as well. My NSF reviews were 6 months late. It's just the name of the game, unfortunately. So even in what, like, or like before, that's not unheard of, sadly. But I can't give you a more like solid answer than that. And that's a great point. Thank you for adding that. If you are not a US citizen, you may not be eligible for many of the federal funding mechanisms. So it's important to kind of understand what you are and are not eligible for. A lot of countries have specific opportunities. So this is a list here that is linked. And again, we'll make these slides available. So you can check out this list. Has like opportunities from like a whole bunch of countries to come and do research in the US. Private foundations, which Karen will talk about in the second hour, many of those have different citizenship requirements. The NIH case series is open to people who do not have citizenship. And then sometimes individual institutions can cost match to offer those same opportunities to people who don't have citizenship. So it's worth kind of asking around and talking to people about what is available to you. A lot of people wanted to know how to find postdoc funding opportunities. Start right here in our own backyard. Penn State's Office of Postdoctoral Affairs website has a whole list. There's hundreds of these out there. There are so many. The challenge is usually actually narrowing down which ones you want to apply for, because you can go to any of these links and there's just like lists and lists and lists. I would also encourage you to talk to people. So people in your department, like what is common in your field? What do other people in your department have? What are they applying to? What have your advisors, postdocs applied to? Things like if you're in ag, you're looking at USDA, right? So really talk to people about what is common in your discipline. A lot of people wanted to know, I'm a doctoral student right now. Can you raise your hand if you're here in person, if you are a PhD student? Okay. So, and let's raise your hand if you're a postdoc. There's several of you here. Perfect. So we're gonna have, yes, okay. We'll split you guys up at one point. Just for a quick minute. So here's like the timeline that people will tell you to do. They will tell you a year before you defend, start applying to postdocs, start applying to fellowships, start applying to postdocs. I didn't do that. I was like in the middle of a mouse study, like do what you can, right? Do what you can, but try to give yourself as much time as you can. In your first year or two, you want to be applying for the most fellowships because unfortunately, many of them have requirements where you have to be within a certain window of getting your PhD. So I don't agree with that way of thinking at all. I think it's incredibly elitist and excludes people who have taken different paths and anyways, but it is what it is. So a lot of times you are only eligible for many fellowships within maybe the first year or 2 years of getting a PhD. After that, you might be looking at something like the case series, something a little bit more advanced. If you are applying for postdocs, which many of you in this room will be, there are many ways to go about getting a postdoc. And postdocs in the room and on Zoom, I'm going to have you share your particular experiences if you're comfortable with that in a quick minute so that you can help everybody in this room. You can fund your own. How cool is that? That's why you're all here. You can write, hey, Professor XYZ at University Y, I really want to work with you. I'm in the last year of my PhD. Here's my ideas for my research. Let's write a fellowship together. And you walk onto campus with your own funding, your own project, and a secure postdoc rate. That's I call that the champagne plan. Like, that's awesome. I want to encourage you all to do that. And that is a thing that you can do. And we're here to help you make it happen. Another way people get postdocs is PI will write a grant. They write a postdoc into that grant, they get the grant funded, and then they're like, hey, I got to hire a postdoc. So keep your eyes on job boards, LinkedIn. Twitter is great for this, X, Blue Sky, whatever you want to be on. And again, talk to people. So you're applying to these just like you would apply for any other job. A little bit less common, you can apply for like an unfunded position. So in my situation, I met Seth. We talked, we had some great synergy. He happened to have like a pot of money available because academia is super weird like that. And so I started a postdoc with him, not necessarily on a funded project, but more of like he had money to pay me and we could kind of design my own project together. That's a little bit more unique. You need to find somebody with startup funds or chair funds or some weird academic money like that, but it's totally doable. So again, talk to people. If you like somebody's research at some university, send them an email. You might never know who has money coming down the pipeline. I will encourage you to be cautious about staying in your current lab, your current institution, or your current field of research in a postdoc. You are encouraged to branch out into new directions. This is, again, something I totally personally disagree with. But I will tell you just the reality of it is I stayed at the institution I got my PhD at, which is Penn State. As a postdoc here, I moved labs, I moved colleges, I moved everything. Every single reviewer I've ever had on any fellowship I've written has commented. You just have to be aware of what the status quo in the field is. And great news, there's like strategies. I strategized my way through writing about it in a way that made reviewers be like, okay, she moved schools, but it's not a big deal because of where she stayed, but it's not a big deal because of this. But just be aware, and definitely many of these fellowships actually will not let you apply if you are in the same lab as your PhD. So if you're staying here at Penn State, you've got to at least move labs at the very least. And I would encourage you to move like as far away from that lab as you can. So different college, different department. Reviewers on postdoctoral fellowships, they want to see you go into a new area of research. They want to see you grow, get new skills. It's really encouraged. So don't feel like you are, researching Drosophila genetics and you've got to stay there for postdoc. You don't, and in fact, you shouldn't. Yes.
So a quick question about branching the research area. I mean, sure, it will give you different opportunities and skill sets, but that has the other side. Like, wouldn't that be a negative component for the future reviewers that they will say, "Oh, this person is not focused in research area." So why?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm glad you asked that. So for Zoom people, the question is, doesn't it look bad to like change directions a lot because people want to see you like stay on a path? The reviews that I've had personally, the reviewers have been very enthusiastic that I have changed research directions multiple times. It's weird. You would think they want you to be on a path. They don't. They want to see you be interdisciplinary. However, it's all about strategy, right? So then you need to be writing it as a strength. Not, oh, I changed my mind and I want to research this. Look at, because I have this well-rounded and interdisciplinary background, I can apply all of these skills to my new research and look at like how important that is and how I'm going to do cool things because of that, right? So a lot of this doesn't come down to the reality, it comes down to the strategy and how you're writing it. The reason that I tell you to plan 6 to 12 months in advance, especially as a PhD student, is these funding mechanisms take forever. So I started my postdoc in August of 2023. I activated my F32 award last month. Had to resubmit, that's very common. So it goes under review again, things get pushed back because of federal meltdowns or just like the normal federal government, like never operates very quickly, right? So deadlines get pushed back, what have you. So if you are dependent on funding to start a postdoc, you got to get that ball rolling and expect to wait at least a year before money comes in the door. As a second example of my timeline, I applied for 6 fellowships in the first year of my postdoc. Good news is that's relatively easy to do because once you write one and you feel like it's good and it's solid and it's there, it's pretty easy to like roll that into different fellowships, right? Change the formatting a little bit, maybe change the tone, gear it towards who you're submitting to, but the material and the bulk of it stay the same. So this was pretty unique. This was a lot of them. Don't know if I like recommend that, but be aware that again, it's something that you can do. You can give yourself as many options as you want to if you can really kind of strategize and get those going. Tips for a timeline. So if you're here in person, you got a handout. If you're on Zoom, I believe Brittany put the attachment in the chat and we'll also send this out via email. I just wrote down some tips from my personal experiences. I would encourage you to make a spreadsheet, stay organized, make a list of what's out there. What do you think your best odds are? I wrote down like what each one requires because some of them require like a gazillion documents. Some of them require like a 2-page thing. That's pretty easy to get it. You need to be communicating with your grants office or foundation early and often. This is another key difference between a fellowship and a research grant. Some of the fellowships you apply for by yourself on your own without Penn State. Some of the fellowships Penn State submits on your behalf, like a research grant. So for example, you cannot submit anything to the NIH. You cannot log on to ERA Commons and submit on your own. You give your fellowship application to your grants office submits it to the NIH on your behalf. Because of that, your deadline just got moved up 2 weeks because now you need to give it to your internal grants office. They're going to have a deadline for you. They will also have some really helpful like handouts for you, right? They're here to help. Foundations is here to help. Karen will give you everything you want to know. So help them help you and plan ahead and be aware. NSF, you submit by yourself as if you were an institution. It's weird. It's very difficult to figure out. Don't make it easy. You've got to read very carefully the details of the solicitation and just be aware that this is something that, what was USDA? Did you submit to your grants office? Yeah. So again, they're funky and they're kind of all over the place. And then you have to, again, schedule time for mentorship and feedback. And I wanted to touch on the importance of feedback. Fellowships are especially brutal because you are being judged on you. And like, that's really hard. Like reviewers are literally filling out a form and part of their scores are you and being judged on like who you are and what you've done as a grad student. That's brutal. But it's really important to have feedback and mentorship. If you go to your advisor and you say, hey, here's this draft of this fellowship, and they write back and they're like, it looks great, let's do it. They're doing you a disservice and you're not getting the mentorship that you deserve. You are a grad student or a postdoc as a training opportunity, and you deserve really good mentorship. So this is a screenshot of the different drafts of my research plan for my F32. Mind you, this is after the first submission. So we had already submitted a full thing. But because of that, I became a way better writer. So accept the feedback, look for the feedback, want the feedback. If you're not getting it from your advisor, find somebody else in your department, find another faculty member, talk to Jennifer, who's the director of the Office of Postdoctoral Affairs, get that feedback somewhere because you need it to write a successful grant. How to get started, you also have this on your handout. It's kind of just little tips and tricks sprinkled throughout. Write down your CV. If you don't have one, make one the minute you get home. Write down everything you do, every seminar you go to, every seminar speaker you meet with. Write down all the stuff that you do with your grad school organizations or anything else that you're involved in on campus. Write down every paper that you are even working on that's in preparation. At this stage of your career, everything counts. And you write about these as a candidate in your fellowship things about like, here's why you're a well-rounded scientist and here's why you're a competitive candidate. I would encourage you to start with writing a one-page specific aims. This is just a one-page, like, what's your research? A paragraph of aim 1, a paragraph of aim 2, paragraph of background. In the NSF, they want a paragraph of like a broader impact statement with outreach stuff. So pick your discipline of choice if you're targeting NIH, NSF, USDA. Get those styles. The handout gives you an example of the NIH and NSF styles. And just start there. That's a very kind of good place to start and bring those ideas to your advisor and go from there. For those of you who are current postdocs, I think because so many of us are PhD students in this audience, just spend like a few minutes sharing your experience as a postdoc. How did you get your postdoc? How did you find your postdoc? And what factors were important to you in that decision? To wrap up the last, I'm going to try to end so that we have a little bit of a break in between since it's a long afternoon. So I'm going to go through an overview of what I have collected during my years of writing these for tips and tricks. Like, this is my opinion, guys. So like, take it, leave it, disagree. Let's talk about it. But I've done quite a few of these with different mentors over the years. And so this is what I put together. So keep in mind, we'll go into this a lot deeper at the next session. This is going to kind of stay surface level for time. We'll talk about the strategy. Like, burn that word in your mind, that it is strategy. We strategize. Okay, start small. Find your one-page specific aims. Find an internal seed grant opportunity. Find a travel grant to write. Start with something very small. Give yourself a nice, like, smooth introduction to grant writing before you take on an F-32 or something that's larger. Or go for the F-32. Like, you gotta do what you gotta do. Use your support network. Ask around your discipline for examples of the funded fellowship you are going for. Okay. I was looking at the Life Sciences Research Foundation page of like awarded people, and I was like, oh, I recognize that guy. I met him at a seminar, and I emailed him. I'm like, hey, would you mind like sharing your successful proposal? And he was like, no, not really. And I was like, cool, man. Like, it's not insulting, right? This is not cheating. This is a really good thing for you to see what works. If you come to the next session, I will share mine with you as well as the panel feedback. And that I think is the most helpful to have. And I will try to get others for the third session. We'll have USDA and NSF as well, who may be willing to share these parts of theirs. And again, once you write one fellowship, it's so much easier to write the next. So it's okay to submit multiple. You can submit multiple about the same topic. That's not cheating. This is all like the way for you to give yourself the best shot at something. So as an example of how I went about this, I first wrote an internal seed grant. This was a one-pager. It was a $5,000 award. It was awesome. Like, let's put down the research ideas and get those cemented. I turned that into a 2-page fellowship, and then I turned that to the F-32. So like, you get on this cycle, it gets easier, you get better, you iterate. So don't be scared of it. Jump in. If you want to stay in academia, that's what you're going to do. You're going to write lots of grants. You got to focus on the training. So these are not afterthoughts. If you write your personal statement last in a fellowship, you got to put as much time into it and as much thought into it. They have to be incredibly specific. Like, so the reviewers are looking for minutia. How often are you going to meet with your advisor and for how long? Like, as specific as you can make it. We're going to talk a little bit about how to anticipate what reviewers are going to think. This is where success is. What are your reviewers looking for? What are some problems that they're going to flag? Because everybody's got some missing thing on their CV, or their sponsor, their advisor has whatever, that reviewers are there to catch it. Your job is to say, the reviewer is going to pick up on this. I'm going to write about it in a way that de-risks it and makes the reviewer feel more comfortable about this guy. For that, you got to know your reviewer. And we'll talk about it. That's just the strategy. There's generally 3 components of these. We're going to talk about you as an applicant, right? You are the candidate, the applicant. These are personal statements. The F-32 used to be called applicant background. They're changing the whole thing. We're gonna talk about the mentor or the sponsor. This is like the formal word for advisor, right? Your postdoctoral advisor. These are usually submitted in some kind of a statement. Some fellowships write them from the sponsor's perspective. Like I, Dr. Seth Bordenstein, first met Emily, like it's written from their voice. Some of them are written from your voice. In the NSF I first wrote Dr. Bordenstein in this. So those can differ, but generally you're writing about your mentor and why they are the perfect mentor for you. And then we're writing about the training environment. You are going to do your postdoctoral research at Penn State, for example, and why is that like the best decision you could ever make? And Penn State is the coolest place for you to be. So we're going to focus on those three main areas of fellowships. You, as the applicant, step one, what's your career goal? Remember, postdocs, training, career training. You want fellowship training objectives to get you to the career that you want. You have to be specific. You can say, my career goal is to stay in academia. Or you could say, my career goal is to obtain a tenure-track professorship at a research-intensive institution. That paints a much more clear picture of you for the reviewers. I will have a quick note about teaching. If your career goal is teaching, you just need to be aware many fellowships have restrictions on what, like how much you can teach, things like that. So strategize. That's an opportunity to strategize. Make a list. What do you need to be competitive for your career? For me, I'm in the Department of Biology. I want to go into academia. I need publications, right? Publication. I need conference presentations. I need to be meeting people, kind of building a network. So those were I needed a little bit of like mentorship experience. So those were my training objectives. Then you think about how to meet those and what you're going to do on the fellowship to meet those. How did your PhD activity set you up for success? Did you get mentorship experience? Did you lead a grad student organization? Did you help organize a symposium? Did you publish? Think about how you are currently a competitive applicant. To start you brainstorming your fellowship process. What I'd like to do, and we're short on time, so this is the only one we're going to do, and we'll just skip the other two. Just jot down, what is your career goal? And what are your training objectives? What are those things that you need to reach your career?
My name is Jacob, and my career goal is lead positions studying nucleic acid structure and its impact on diseases.
Awesome. What are your training like? What are the things that you need to get there?
Bioinformatics and genomics experience.
Okay.
Both the lab and computational aspects. Mentorship experience with undergrads, graduate students, and definitely networking.
Awesome. I love that. So these are things that you can start thinking about. This is how you start your fellowship, right? You need to have goals. They need to be clear and detailed. For the sake of time, let's just keep going. Jacob, that was fantastic. Thank you. Again, if you're here in person, please stick around for a couple minutes afterwards and share with each other, because talking about this and starting to put it into words is how you start like writing, right, your fellowships. Okay, mentor. This is a tough one. This is a tough slide. Because the reality is that your mentor is evaluated and judged just as much as you are as a candidate. They are evaluated as a scientist and they are evaluated as a mentor. And they are evaluated by reviewers, and the reviewers are looking for specific things. So you need to be aware of something that we're terming like prestige bias. For example, in my F-32, it was the reviewers brought up specific points. Oh, my mentor, Seth, who directs the One Health Crime Center, he's the director of this center. He's published in Nature and Science. He's a full tenured professor. Those things were ranked very highly. Does publishing in science make you a fantastic postdoctoral mentor? Maybe, maybe not. Again, the point is like not whether I personally agree with the way that they're judging your mentor. You just need to be aware that this is how the system typically works. So if you were like in my PhD, I did my PhD with a brand new professor. I was her first student. We strategized. We added a co-mentor who was a senior tenured professor that was reviewed very highly. So again, knowing your reviewers, you kind of have to like judge your mentor fairly critically and look for those gaps that reviewers are going to pick up on and address them. You have the expertise, does your mentor have the expertise that's needed? For example, you want to do mouse work, your mentor's never done mouse work. You've got to address that somehow. So think about not only the prestige, but what are they known for? What is their expertise? What is their reputation in the field for? Your mentor is not expected to provide all of your mentorship. And in fact, it's really encouraged nowadays to go beyond the mentor-mentee dichotomy and to treat your mentorship like a network. Add a co-sponsor. That's awesome. Add a mentoring committee. Think of it like a doctoral committee, but you're not like having qualifying exam, right? I had a postdoctoral mentoring committee on my fellowship applications. That spanned multiple institutions. I added somebody from the West Coast. They brought in different areas of expertise. Again, you have to be specific. So I wrote mine. I am going to meet with them, I think like once a year. I'm going to meet with this committee once a year. They're going to evaluate my progress. We're going to talk about if I'm on track or not. So it's okay to go beyond your advisor and think about other ways that you're going to get mentoring. These have to be specific and they have to be goal. Like as I got negative reviews in my F32 because I had a co-sponsor. Reviewer said, I see how often you're going to meet with your mentor. I see how often you're going to meet with your co-sponsor. How often are you going to meet with both of them together? Like, so like you think you're specific enough, you're not. Be more specific. Be as specific as you can. You're going to attend lab meetings, right? You're going to have weekly one-on-ones or what have you. You're going to evaluate your progress. How? Maybe you do an IDP. Maybe you submit abstracts to the specific conference. Like specific. The next activity we're gonna, but do it on your own after this or during the break. Just write down all of these. How are you going to create this environment with your mentor? This is really a team, a collaboration between you and them. Okay, finally, institution. Good news. This was ranked the highest out of all of my fellowships was the institution. And that has nothing to do with me or my mentor. So anybody in this room can get those same scores because you're at Penn State. Penn State makes this so easy because we have a lot of stuff here. It's a big institution. So focus on the resources that Penn State has that facilitates your training and how you will use them. Okay, so a lot of Penn State facilities have parts of their website that you literally copy and paste. For example, I work on the supercomputer Roar. You go to Roar's website, they have like this thing like this that you copy and paste into your facilities page that tells your reviewers, I have the infrastructure that I need to do my research. Very convincing. There's also a part where you write more of like a narrative, right? And that's where you really sell like, we're at Penn State, we're a member of the HUC, I'm a member of the Microbiome Center. I'm getting all of these awesome things that Penn State has to offer. So strategize. Office of Postdoctoral Affairs, your department, do they put on seminars? Do they have workshops, for example? And then again, the specific, I hope like specific just sticks with you. How are you going to use these? So we're not going to say the Department of Biology holds weekly seminars. We are instead going to say the Department of Biology holds weekly seminars that I regularly attend and take advantage of the opportunity to meet the speakers from all over the world. For example, I met with Dr. So-and-so last week from University of something, right? Not just that these resources are here, how are you using them to further your career development? Networking, perfect example, right there, right? It's like a one sentence thing. So just like so specific. So another one that I would encourage you to just sit here while it's fresh in your mind, just write down, what do you have? Are you a member of a center, an institute, a department? If you're not, they're free. Like, you don't have to pay anything. Go join one. Tell your advisor to join one. You know, use these resources that are here available to you. Okay, I hope if you take nothing else away, that you take away these big things. We're going to start very early. We are going to strategize everything that we say. We are going to be incredibly so specific that you're writing down everything that you're going to do in your fellowship. You're going to anticipate what reviewers are going to see. For me, my big one was I stayed at my same institution. I knew that. I knew reviewers were going to flag it. I wrote about it in a way that made reviewers more comfortable so that they did not see it as a weakness. And they still flagged it. And they still said, oh, by the way, she's staying at Penn State, but it's okay because she is doing this, this, and that to meet whatever expectations they have in their lives. Finally, I hope that you recognize everybody around you wants you to succeed. So it's so okay, and we encourage you, reach out to people around you, reach out to other postdocs, reach out to other faculty members, reach out to Jennifer and people at the Hub. We all want to see you succeed. Even though these are so, so competitive, just the process of going through it, we hope is really useful to you and gets you something and helps you improve. With that, join us in this session 2. If you found this helpful, we're going to go much deeper into each of these. We're going to use the F-32 as an example, but again, all of these skills and strategies really transfer. We're going to talk about do's and don'ts, kind of like we did today, but I'm going to share the panel summary feedback so you can see what reviewers are actually looking for and talking about and commenting on.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you all for being here. So my name is Karen, as you mentioned, as Emily mentioned. So in my role as an associate director of foundation relations, we handle the non-federal, non-state types of funding. And as I mentioned, I'm the EMS, nursing, HUC, and Epperly College of Science liaison, so feel free to reach out to me. You can ask questions at the end. Slides will be provided afterwards, and feel free to email me any comments or questions that we don't get to. So at the end of this presentation, I'm hoping that you will understand the different nonprofit private foundation funding opportunities. I hope that you will understand the structure and role of our office. And I would say the way our office is structured is similar to how other universities are structured, like corporate and foundation relations offices. So this isn't just like a Penn State thing. It's usually CFR offices at universities that are under university development. So this is the same people who collect money from alumni to fund projects and programs at the universities. So I'm not under research. So I'm not a research administrator or anything like that. I'm hoping you'll get a better understanding of non-federal funding proposal considerations, because some of what Emily was talking about with her federal funding opportunities is very different from my experience. A lot of foundations don't necessarily want specifics, and they don't give feedback much of the time. So our office, because we keep all the past submissions, you can come to us and we can kind of share things, patterns of successful applications. And then lastly, I have a resource list, both internal and external, for where you can find foundation opportunities. So a lot of people ask what foundations are. Essentially, they're tax exempt. A rich person puts money into an endowment, and then that money is invested in the stock market, and 5% of the assets after the money has grown in investments is then expected to be, it's expected to fund charitable activities, and research at Penn State is an example of a charitable activity. At Penn State, private funding brought in about 10% of the funding, so about 133.5 million, and this number is growing given the political landscape. Some things to know are that foundations are different. The family foundations tend to be run by family members, and their preferences are what counts. So you have to know a family member or a friend of a family member. Independent foundations tend to have boards that are independent. They have scientific experts from different fields. So you're more likely to get success with those. Corporate foundations tend to fund research that is specific to what their product is that they're developing, or others focus on the geographic area where they're located. So, for example, PPG, which is, it's employed a lot of Penn State chemistry majors. PPG might say they want to fund only Pennsylvania postdocs or something like that. International foundations are ones that are international in scope, meaning they could be foundations based in the US, but that fund anyone across the world, or they could be based in the US, but fund, sorry, I don't know if I got that right. They could be international foundations from elsewhere, but fund, sorry, anyway, you get the gist. International foundations, they fund anyone, not just US based researchers. Some things to note, just because something has foundation in it, doesn't mean it's a foundation. And just because something has corporation in it, doesn't mean it's not a foundation. So the term foundation doesn't really make any sense unless you understand the structure of what they are. So even before a lot of the uncertainty with federal funding has been flat for basic scientific research in the last 15 years. So it's important to diversify your funding portfolio, which, you know, a lot of you are already aware of and are trying to do. Many of you, and the same thing I experienced, are international. So I would say for a lot of our international friends, for some of these foundations that don't, that have citizenship requirements, make sure you take advantage of other things like maybe travel grants from your professional societies, or I have other examples on that topic, but essentially, I would say compared to some of the federal funding opportunities, foundations tend to be more open to anyone applying that is based at a US institution. These are some of the foundations that have funded research at Penn State. Now, full disclosure, we mostly work with faculty, but I have worked with a few postdocs, like Emily just said, on their postdoc fellowship proposals. A key thing to note is the reason our office exists is because every foundation is different. They have different terms and conditions, different application materials. Some of them don't want to hear from applicants. They only want to hear from their university contact. So we would be the university contact. So just because you know one foundation doesn't mean you know any other foundation. So our office actually has one staff member tied to every single foundation that Penn State applies to. So that person would be responsible for keeping track of changing priorities, keeping track of who's been funded and what the foundation plans to fund in the future. So types of private funding mechanisms. These come in different types. So there's requests for proposals, which you know, and these are similar in federal funding opportunities. So those are competitive, but then you have relationship-based proposals. This would be if you happen to be at a conference and you're presenting your poster and a program officer from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation comes to you and says, hey, I'm interested in this work. Can you meet with me later for lunch and talk about your project or something like that? So there's a lot of non-competitive proposals where after you as a postdoc or a faculty member meets the program officer, they then work together to build a proposal that works for both their Penn State research and the foundation's mission. There's fellowships to individuals, and then there's awards to institutions. And Emily touched upon this. The awards that go to institutions, so like the ones that go to Penn State is the applicant, and you as a postdoc or grad student are the PI. So just because it's your research doesn't mean you can accept terms and conditions and apply on your own. You need a research administrator to do that. Because what would happen is if you apply on your own, you get the grant, and then it comes to Penn State, and Penn State can't accept certain terms and conditions that you agree to, well, Penn State would have to decline the grant. So that's important to note. However, fellowships to individuals, if the money comes to you, you don't necessarily have to contact your research administrator. That would just be you working with your postdoc or grad school advisor to submit an application. Foundations have opportunities, corporations have opportunities, corporate foundations also have opportunities, as well as your professional societies and associations like American Chemical Society, Society for Neuroscience, etc. Key differences, foundation opportunities, the first step is open a letter of intent. So it's 1 to 2 pages, and then these are reviewed by foundation staff. Now, a lot of times foundation staff are not scientists, so you can't be too technical. You need to just address who, what, when, where. What's the problem? How are you going to address it? How are you going to, what's your research proposal, hypotheses, outcomes, all that. So yeah, letter of intent. And then after that, you're invited to a full proposal. Now, the full proposals are longer, usually 6 to 12 pages. So not like 75 pages like Emily was talking about. And another key thing about foundation proposals is that there's sometimes a delayed resubmission period. So if you submit this year, some foundations will tell you you can't apply again until next year or like 2 years from now, because they want to spread the wealth. They want as many different people applying at different times. Relationships matter for foundations. So like I said, we get to know program officers really well, figure out what they want, and we connect them with faculty and postdocs students. Say, hey, can you talk to this person? They're doing this work that your foundation is interested in. And as I mentioned, not all foundation program officers want to hear questions from you. So it's best to contact our office, and I have a slide showing the process. And then we can tell you whether or not you can reach out. Reviewers may not be experts in your field, as I mentioned. For those that listed, make sure that when you're applying for a foundation, you look at the review board. So sometimes it's people in industry or people that could be specific to your field if it's a foundation specific to your field. So you don't want to make it too technical for an educated lay audience, but you don't want to make it too generalized if it's an expert review panel. You have to show societal impact. So it's not just enough to publish a paper. You have to explain how your proposal will affect mankind, which is kind of, it can be hard because it's not like you're curing cancer or like some topics are so basic and so fundamental that like it's hard to explain the broader impacts, but foundations want to see. And as I mentioned, unlike with Emily, there's usually no feedback. So you would rely on your grants office or our office to tell you what proposals have been successful and what others are not. Federal grants tend to be larger, and foundations can decide within like a week that we're no longer going to fund nationally, we're going to fund only like Center County, Pennsylvania. So if you were in the process of applying and you don't know that, you might waste your time. So our office keeps track, like I said, that one person per foundation keeps track of all these changing priorities. Pros and cons of foundation funding. As I mentioned, a lot of times there's no citizenship requirements. There's a lot of early careers, so like assistant professor level, postdoc, fellowship opportunities. The first step is open a letter of intent, so you're not wasting time putting together a large proposal and then you find out that the foundation is not interested. The success rate can be high if you're invited to full proposal. So whereas for the letters of intent, it's kind of low, like 5%, depending on the number of applications they get. But once you're invited, it tends to be like 30%. The cons are the short timeline. So one of the reasons it's important to talk to your CFR office, Corporate and Financial Relations, or your grant fellowships office is some private funders, especially foundations, will release an RFP 6 weeks before the deadline. So by the time you see it, get a research administrator on board, write your proposal, get reference letters, there's no time. So it helps to know the recurring opportunities, like, okay, I expect that this foundation is going to publish their RFP in August. So you start preparing in like June or something. And our office has recurring lists by discipline or different foundations. Penn State is geographically isolated, so some universities are better able to connect to foundations just because they have a lot of them in the area. But as Emily mentioned, we have a lot of institutes and centers, and we do a lot of interdisciplinary work. So we're a strong institution, just maybe not geographically. And there's nothing we can do about that. Except I guess we could always collaborate with people at the East and West Coasts. Low amounts, as I mentioned, and then proposal feedback is subjective. So someone might just like the idea of your topic and not care about the actual technical details of it because they're not a scientist. So the feedback really varies. So our office, since I've explained the sort of the general scope of foundation funding mechanisms, our office talks with campus and college deans and associate deans of research and institute heads to kind of tell them, okay, what topics are, what are this college's strengths? Like, oh, maybe the College of Ag is strong in One Health. Maybe EMS is strong in materials research. So then we find funders by topic, not necessarily by department. And that's because a lot of funding has moved towards interdisciplinary work. So it's not just like, oh, I'm in the Department of Biology. It's more someone is a hack and they're collaborating with an engineer or a social scientist. We collaborate with the research administrators in your units. They do the internal approvals, the budgeting. So like you can't send out a budget without approval from a research administrator. And then they also do submissions. Unless they tell you, oh no, we're not doing it, you can do it. So they have to give you approval to submit. But that only, as I said, applies to the ones that are, and the grants that are administered to Penn State, not to you as an individual. And then lastly, we spend a lot of time talking to foundation program staff at the different foundations, and we watch a lot of webinars. So that we can do all the work on the back end, so that when you come to us as an applicant, we can tell you, oh, the last webinar, they said they want this, they don't want this, so that we can be as helpful as we can. So these are the staff assignments by unit and by foundation. Centrally, like our office manages 309 foundations across the US, but across the university, there's about 660 foundations with an individual staff person assigned to them. And most of the excess ones are actually at the College of Medicine. So they have a lot of disease-specific funding opportunities. In order to contact us, foundations at phc.edu, and then you'll be directed to the right person. So what we do, we identify a foundation. Say you come to us, you're like, I'm a postdoc in engineering, I'm interested in this topic. We help you find foundation opportunities, and then we work with you in preparing your proposal. But if someone doesn't come to us for the RFPs that are posted, we post them on InfoReady. I have links to that. It's essentially a database where Penn State posts all its funding opportunities, internal and external, and then you can apply there. As I said, we talk to deans and institute heads about their research needs. We help strengthen both the letter of intent and proposal. And then there's what they call stewardship. So a lot of foundations, like, we treat them like individuals, not like organizations. So for example, we'll send out condolence letters if the foundation's wife passed away, or over Christmas break, we send cards, we send chocolates. So it's a lot of like personal relationships with the foundations rather than like, this is the scientific review board, here's the proposal, may the best person win. So that's what we call stewardship. And then cultivation is maintaining those relationships, making sure we send them all the fun stuff that's happening at Penn State that is aligned with the foundation's mission, so that they keep us in their, on their radar. And then they sometimes will come to us asking, hey, do you have a PI in this field? So these are the things in general that our office does. So for you, I mentioned some of these earlier, can identify funding for you, help you work on your proposal. We do informational sessions for specific fellowship programs like the Schmidt Science Fellowship. We do one-on-one meetings, mock interviews for finalists for certain fellowship programs. And then we can answer any foundation related questions, even including the ones for the foundations that fund individuals, because we have databases that list all the funding opportunities. So even though we can't necessarily help you work on those, we can at least identify those and help you answer like basic questions. So resources for grant seekers, these are internal resources. So I listed InfoReady, which is the database I mentioned, the internal and external grant programs, limited submissions. So if only a few Penn State people can apply, you have to go through the limited submissions office. Because what you don't want is to submit an application and someone else went through the internal selection process, and then Penn State is disqualified because we have too many applicants. So limited submissions is good to contact if you're ever unsure about that. The Graduate Fellowships Office, they're very helpful with different different grad school fellowship questions, not just private ones. OPA, Office of Postdoctoral Affairs, has a list of funding opportunities, and I make sure that my office, when we have foundation opportunities relevant to postdocs, that we send them to Jennifer Nicholas, who then puts it on the foundation, the postdoc funding website. And then every college has specific funding pages, so make sure you visit those. Externally, Yale has a pretty good postdoc like comprehensive list. Non-NIH funding opportunities are listed on this Fogarty International Program page, and it includes both federal and private funding. And then the University of Washington has, in my opinion, the most comprehensive list. So there's like thousands of opportunities on there. So I would encourage you to visit that, search by keyword, your field or the word post, and the postdoc opportunities will come up. So for the process, if you find a non-federal funding opportunity, you can contact us at foundations@psu.edu. We'll send you to the right person. We'll say, Emily manages the relationship with this foundation, work with her. If it's a limited submission, you have to contact limited submissions. And then we provide feedback on your proposal. The unit research administrators help you submit your proposals if they are, if the money comes to the institution. And OPA and the grad fellowships offices both have their own lists for all private opportunities, including ones that go to individuals. Some pre-award considerations. Emily did a really good job touching upon this, so this is mostly review. So let's see. Okay, I'll start at the top. So facilities and administration costs, so indirect costs tend to be lower for foundations. So in order to apply, you would need approval from your associate dean for research in order, so that if the money comes, they have to find the money some other way, because federal grants pay the full indirect cost. And then guidelines, terms, and conditions are all different for different foundations. Sometimes when we see weird things about like intellectual property, like the foundation wants to keep all of it. I mean, that never happens, but I'm saying if you see like weird language and something you're applying to and the money's coming to Penn State, it's helpful to talk to your research administrator. That way they can do all the internal checks to make sure that you're not jeopardizing your work. And that Penn State retains ownership of the intellectual property rights. Make sure to look at past awardees for foundations, because a lot of them have vague eligibility. They could just say anyone that has a PhD. But then when you look at past awardees, it's like assistant professors pre-tenure, or they can, or some foundations will say postdocs are eligible. But when you look in the last 10 years, no postdoc has been funded. So make sure you look at those past awardees to know whether or not you should spend your time on the foundation. Our office is also helpful in finding out information that's not on websites. So a lot of foundations are just managed by like 3 or 4 people. And they don't have websites, so we can look at tax forms because foundations are required to list who received funding. So we can find some information you may not be able to find on your own. Make sure you know the funding philosophy, and we can tell you that some foundations have blinded applications. Anyone could apply. The best proposal wins, but as Emily said, there's prestige bias. So some foundations, when you look at their awardees, it's all like Ivy League, or people who have mentors who are in certain like scientific at a certain rank. So it's good to know that, so you know whether or not you should spend the time, or if you can like bring in someone else to be your co-mentor. And another thing on that, some foundations have told us if someone at Penn State got an award this year, they're not gonna give Penn State an award the next year. So that's useful for you guys to know. That may not be published elsewhere. Yeah, and then the other thing Emily also mentioned is the foundation fellowships tend to evaluate not just your research proposal, but you as a person. So any extracurricular activities that you can mention are helpful. So elements of successful proposals, you can read these on your own later, but just to quickly go through them. Reference letters are super important. Especially for foundations that are competitive. You could have a really good research proposal and you're ranked highly, but then your reference writer writes a generic letter like, he was my student from this year to this year. He published this number of papers. He'll be good. Like, they don't want that. You as an applicant need to go and download the rubric that the foundation is using to evaluate you, and then give specific examples of what you've done in each of those criteria to your letter writers so that they can hit each of the different criteria on your behalf. So that's really key. Abstracts, make sure you have everything on there, because I'm sure like federal funding, federal sponsors, they get thousands of applications. Your abstract should have who, what, when, where. Like, someone should be able to talk about your project by only looking at the abstract. So make sure you take the time to really hit on all the different key points that the foundation might be looking for, and make sure you align your abstract with the foundation's mission. So some foundations are about education and teaching and training. So make sure your expected outcomes are education or training oriented rather than research oriented. So make sure you know the type of foundation you're applying to, because they care about different things. As I mentioned before, write specifically for the reviewers. Look them up. Yeah, if they're generalists, write a general application. If they're technical, be very specific. Mirror the foundation's language. So if they say references cited, don't say bibliography, because these people have no time. They're looking for keywords. They're doing Control F. So if you use the exact words that are on the website in your proposal, then it just makes things easier for everyone. I always tell people to print out a personal rubric of the evaluation criteria. Like, after you've written your proposal, go through that and see, okay, what am I missing? What is my proposal missing? What could I improve upon? Common pitfalls is when, like I said, not knowing what the foundation wants, talking about basic research when they're looking for more applied, more societal impact research, talking about research when really they're interested in policy, or talking about like an early stage innovation when they're looking for something that already has preliminary data and has been user tested. So yeah, just making sure you know where in the research to commercialization process, for example, your proposal would fit. Formatting instructions, this is the same with federal grants. If they say 12-point Times New Roman and you have Arial font, like they won't even look at your proposal. Ineligibility, a lot of foundations now, I don't know if this is legal, but they have a lot of age restrictions. And then there's a lot of geographic restrictions as well. Penn State is a nonprofit, but it's not a 501c3 nonprofit. So there's what they call the Penn State University Philanthropic Fund. So if you ever encounter a foundation that says we don't accept Penn State as an applicant, you can reach out to our office. We can we can help you use PSU Philanthropic Fund as the applicant. And then they just get the money and then they send it to Penn State. A lot of people will apply as Penn State and the application is just like tossed because they're ineligible from the get-go. Yeah, I mentioned all of these. Oh, the person versus project one. So some foundations care about you as a whole person. So you need to talk about your strengths, your mentorship, your leadership, your teaching, and your research program. So like all the things you envision doing in the next 2 to 5 years. You can't talk about a specific research project. If you do that, you won't be competitive. So understanding the difference, the person versus project foundations. Common examples of foundation opportunities. There's so many, I can't even list them, but these are the ones I worked on most recently and with a lot of postdocs. There's a Jane Coffin Childs. Here you can see I wrote the scope and I have a link so you can look at those in your own free time. In general, postdoc opportunities tend to be open October through February. So around winter break, like Christmas break is when people work on those. It's good to know that because a lot of people miss things. I get emails on like January 15th, like this is due January 31st. Can I put in an application? It's like, no. So keep in mind, October to February. So these are like general, like aging research, STEM, whatever. And then the specific ones, like the American Foundation for AIDS research is HIV specific. There are a few others that are field dependent. So I wanted to highlight a case study. So there's a Schmidt Science Fellowship proposal. And to be eligible for this, you have to obtain your PhD between May 15th, 2025 this year and June 30th, 2026. So we have a limited submission application open now. If you go to InfoReady, it's linked on one of the screens, one of the slides. It's due April 15th. This is for $110,000 per year for 2 years for a postdoc, but you have to apply as a grad student. And it's for someone who wants to pivot. So chemistry to physics or AI to, I don't know, biolab research. So the way we got involved in the Schmidt Science Fellowship Program is we had to apply to be an invited institution. So this is a fellowship that is relevant to everyone across the globe. And so Penn State had to apply to be an eligible institution. We had to fill out different criteria, and then they agreed that we could be considered. And since 2020, we've been asked to submit 4 nominees, and that's through the limited submissions process. So after those 4 nominees are picked, they work with our office to strengthen their applications, and then they submit online to a portal that only we have access to. So this is a collaboration between the graduate school and us. So we do information webinars in the fall and in the spring about this particular opportunity. And the graduate school runs the limited submission, and we help the nominees with their proposal. And then 2 years ago, we had 1 finalist. And last year we had 2 finalists. We haven't yet had a Schmidt Science Fellow, but we're hoping we'll have one. And for this particular fellowship, I think they get over 500 applications and only 32 people are successful. So the fact that Penn State has had finalists in at least 2 of the 5 years that this program has run is not bad. So homework for you, visit the links that I included. Write a relevant list of foundations, including timeline and eligibility. Discuss with your advisors. And then for those who are international, apply to travel grants and different professional awards in your professional societies. That's what I did to like beef up my resume because I didn't have other fellowships from the government because I wasn't eligible. Talk to program officers at conferences, you know, they usually have like, you know, like the table, the exhibition booths with all the swag, like t-shirts, pens, you know, talk to them, ask them how their process works. Because even if they don't give funding, maybe for you as a postdoc, maybe it could be funding relevant to your advisor who could then write you into the grant and fund you. And then lastly, contact us if you have questions. So at the beginning, I said I had 4 presentation goals, and I hope that from those, you can understand that there's competitive and non-competitive foundation opportunities. We're here to help. Each RFP and review process is different, so right before the reviewer is not just like a generic application. And then in terms of finding opportunities, visit those resource slides. And with that, I'll take questions.
Karen, can you clarify that limited submission is a process where people from Penn State first apply, Penn State selects their finalists and then helps them submit their proposal to the agency?
Yes, so a limited submission would be anywhere if you find a random foundation opportunity and it says only 2 people from Penn State can apply, or even if it says only 2 people per college can apply, then you have to contact limited submissions, because if you apply on your own, that's a violation of policy. And you don't know if there's already an internal competition where they're collecting internal applications that you just haven't seen. So yeah, so it's an internal process to pick the people who would then apply.
What do you mean by an institute is geographically disadvantaged? And you mentioned one strategy to overcome that, to collaborate with someone that is not geographically disadvantaged. Any other strategy to overcome
that? So I guess what I meant was, so Center County PA has maybe like 3 foundations, whereas if you were in San Francisco, there's like 100. Because there's a lot more billionaires that have put money into an endowment and all that. And a lot of foundations are regional. So you can only apply if you're in that state or in that county. So that's why I mean by geographically isolated, because we're just not eligible because we're not in close proximity of a lot of the large foundations. With regard to strategy on how to deal with that, I guess what we've done is if a PI at Penn State has a collaborator at, say, UCSD, then they would be co-PIs on a proposal, and then that proposal could then find a postdoc at Penn State. So finding people that are in those places where particular foundations are geographically limited is helpful. And also, the other strategy we use is for reference, when we see that a foundation has mostly funded East Coast, West Coast, we help PIs, like faculty, identify letter writers who are kind of adjacent to those institutions. So maybe your advisor went to grad school with another advisor at a particular institution. Your advisor can ask that person to write you a letter. And then when the reviewers, sorry, it's like a whole thing. When the reviewers from that foundation see, oh, I know this professor, he's at UCSD, then you rank higher. Like, unfortunately, there is like prestige bias. And then, for example, some foundations care that that letter writers or mentors are part of the New York Academy of Science. So you would have to look at which professors are in that, and then make sure that your letter writer is in like a particular distinctive professional society. I don't know what it is, like academies, national academies of science. Yeah, so you have to make sure the people supporting you are in the National Academies of Science, just to rank high.